Okay, so we're going to have a look at creating our walk cycle animation using the cutout technique. So first of all, if you open up the assets file that has the character, the puppet in there, so if we go to file and open, and it's the one that's got assets in capitals at the beginning, so if I open that up, and then you'll see we've got our character. I've already separated out one of the arms and both the legs, but just to recap on how to select the limbs. So once you've drawn your character, with the limbs protruding, to select the limbs, if you remember, it's the lasso tool. So if I select the lasso tool, I can then carefully draw around the remaining limb separate. So I've got that selected separately now. I can move that away. So I've got all the elements that I need to group and turn into separate objects. So to group objects, we go to Modify and Group, or Control and G. So if I do that for each of these objects, so again, if they're spaced out like this, you should be able to, just with the black selection arrow, drag around them to select them. Control and G to group, so they become individual objects. Okay, and then finally the head and the torso, and again Control and G, so that's another object. So we've got our grouped object. So what we want to do is we want to put these inside a movie clip. Okay, so if we go over to the library, and you can see at the bottom left hand corner of the library we have a new symbol button. So if we click on that, and we've got the create new symbol dialog here. So we're going to give it a name, call it character, make sure the type is set to movie clip, and then if we OK that, you'll see that we've created an empty movie clip without anything in it at the moment. And you can see the top left here, this tells us where we are, so this tells us that we're inside the movie clip. So if we click on this arrow, this takes us back to the main timeline. Okay, so what I want to do is take these assets and I can just cut them. So edit and cut, or Control X, and then I can go to the library here. If I double click on this character movie clip that I've created, that takes us back inside that movie clip. We can check that we're inside it by looking up top left here, and then I can just paste. I can go to edit and paste in place and paste those elements inside, so they're now inside the movie clip. Okay, so the first stage of this is creating the walk cycle. We're going to keep it just to a 2-frame walk cycle. It can be more than that, obviously, but keep it to two frames for the time being. So the first thing with the black selection arrow is I'm just going to arrange things here. Now to zoom in, if you remember, it's Control and mouse wheel. So if I zoom in a bit, then with black selection arrow, it makes now these are objects. They're easier to select and position. So if I move these into position, the other useful thing is, once you've got elements on the same layer like this, there is still a kind of a hierarchy in order. You can arrange them. So, for example, if I wanted, we want this arm to be behind the body here. We want it to be on top of the body. We go to Modify and Arrange and Bring to Front. You'll see that I've brought it above the body. So there are kind of almost layers within a layer there. So just send that back. So Modify, Arrange, center back. So that's back behind. So that's fine. And remember, if you hold down spacebar, you can also click and drag and move the page around as well. Move the stage around. So the into place. So there we go. So we've got him set up now. He looks like he's ready to, or mid-walk, in a kind of walking position. So the next thing is to create our second keyframe. So this is where we start to actually animate. At the moment we're still dealing with a static image. So if I click on frame 3, press F6, just remember to if you're on a PC that the function lock key is on, press F6 and that will insert a keyframe at frame 3 here on the timeline. If I then press F5, that extends that keyframe. So now we have two keyframes that are both 2 frames long. For the second keyframe, we want to start manipulating the arms and the legs. Before we do that, we're going to turn on onion skin. So onion skin, they've moved the symbols up above the timeline now, which is better because they used to be down at the bottom of the timeline and difficult to get at sometimes with the pop-up taskbar, particularly getting in the way. So the onion skin setting is here with 2 overlapping circles. So if I select that, and you'll see that it creates these 2 markers that shows which frames are visible using onion skin. So now if I make sure that the needle is at frame 2 here, and this is a key part of the technique, so using the transform tool, okay, I can click on these individual limbs, and you see at the moment there's like a white circle in the center here, and we're going to use this as our kind of pivot, as our joint, yeah? So if we move that up to the point where it joins the body, and then we can rotate that around that, can pivot around that. So if you do that for all 4 limbs, fine. Yep. So if you do that for all 4 limbs, and then on the second keyframe, we're going to start animating. So we're going to start moving these limbs. Now, as I start to move them, you'll see that we see the ghost image of what was on the previous frame here. So this helps us judge, you know, how our animation is progressing from one frame to the next. So if we just, that basic principle with a walk is just remember that left leg follows right arm follows left leg, yeah. So this is his left arm, so this is kind of in sync with his right leg here, and then this is his left leg, which is in sync with his right arm. Okay, so there we go. We're starting to build up a basic walk, you know, a stylized walk. If I turn onion skin off now, what we can do is if we click on this loop symbol here and then the play icon, we can just loop through and have a look at how that's shaping up. All right, we've got a basic walk there. Okay, so that's 2 frames. Like I said, you can obviously use more than that. So we've got that set up. That's now inside our movie clip, and we'll play on a loop. So again, just emphasizing, this is where movie clips are so useful because they have their own timeline, yeah. So particularly for looping animations, they're great because you can have things playing on a loop inside the movie clip. But then, as I'm going to demonstrate, you can have additional animation actually happening on the main timeline. And where this is really useful is, so we've got our character now here in the library. So I'm going to drag him onto the stage. Remember, all the animation we've just done is inside this movie clip. So we'll drag him onto the stage. We've got all that animation nested in there. But on the main stage, I want to animate him further. Okay. Now at the moment, if I test the movie, so just test, so control and test, you'll see he's just on a loop, looping through that walk animation. What I want him to do, obviously, you know, is I want him to move across the stage as well. So to do that, I'm going to use something called a motion tween. All right. So I'm going to decide, okay, and we know this from when you've done your storyboard. So you know, make the decision: how long is this scene going to last, and how long is this walk cycle going to last? So I'm going to say about 5 seconds. So if I go down to the timeline here, and if I click under 5S here, 5 seconds, press F5, and that blocks that, extends that keyframe for 5 seconds. Then if I right click on that block and add a motion tween, Okay, so we've set up the motion tween. Now we just need to decide, you know, what form the motion is going to take. So on the first keyframe here, I'm going to move the character off stage left, and then I'm going to drag the needle to the end of the motion tween. Okay, and if I move the character now, it automatically creates a keyframe on the timeline. You can see the black dot appear there that represents a keyframe. So I've dragged him off from stage left to stage right, and you'll see this line with dots on will appear. This is called a motion path, and each of these dots represents a frame. Okay, so the computer has basically tweened this animation for us, yeah, between these two keyframes. If I scrub the needle back, you'll see now that he's moving from left to right across the stage. Now, if we remember, there's also that walk that's nested inside the movie clip. So if I go to Control and Test, we'll see both animations playing now, yeah? The one that's nested inside the movie clip and the one that's on the main timeline using the tween. Okay, so we can further modify this. So say you've got your storyboard set up and you've got a character walking. He's not walking from left to right. Well, it's not walking from left to right, but it's walking from background to foreground. Yeah. So if I now, what I can do is I can very simply scale our character. So if I go to the transform tool, hold down shift, scale him down, and maybe I want him moving from top left down to bottom right. Yeah. So I can manipulate this now. I can click and move him up to top left corner. I can scrub the needle to the end of that tween and scale him up. Okay, and I can move him maybe down to bottom right here. If I scrub back now, you'll see that it's not only tweening motion, but it's also tweening shape. Okay, that transformation, which is the scale of the shape. Okay, so that's really useful for creating this sense of a background and a foreground. What we can also do is we can use a convention that you find in film a lot and animation, where if an object moves from the background into the foreground, it goes from out of focus to in focus. Yeah, so we can use a blur filter to do that. So if I select the character on this first keyframe here, and if I go to properties, and if I go down to the filter, so we've got a series of properties nested here. To tidy it up, what I can do, I can click on these arrows to either nest or expand these different settings. If I go to filters here and expand that, at the moment there are no filters. To add a filter, click on the plus sign and select blur. Now now you'll see immediately blurs. I can click and drag these values here to determine how blurred he is. Okay, there's also quality settings there. I'll put it to medium actually. And then if I scrub the needle to the end, now you'll see that at the moment he remains blurred. Okay, so to tween the blur from blurred to clear, I click on him on this second keyframe, go back to filters here and set the blur to 0. That should tween it. Yeah, so you can see it's tweened. Just make sure that's. You can see now that's tweened him from blurred to clear. Okay, so you can easily just, once you've set it up, you can go back in and tweak these values by using the properties panel here. Okay, so again, if we test that now, so we've got a few things going on. We've got the walk cycle, we've got him moving from one part of the stage to another, we've got him increasing in scale and size, and we've also got him going from out of focus to in focus. So if I test this now, okay, so that's a really useful technique that obviously walk cycles are fundamental. Also this idea of I think thinking of a foreground and a background can be very useful. and using blur to create this kind of this sense of depth as well. Okay.